Once upon a time, a millionaire CEO went to buy an engagement cake and saw his ex at the counter holding a little girl. What he discovered changed everything. Secrets came to light, and their lives transformed forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. Chapter 1. The Scent of Destiny. The engine of the black Tesla Model X purred softly as David Johnson parked in front of the traditional Sweet Memories bakery in Greenwich Village. At 38, he had achieved everything a man could. Desire, CEO of Johnson Holdings, a business empire ranging from construction companies to investment funds, a penthouse on Wall Street with a panoramic view of New York City, a collection of imported cars, and in 3 weeks he would marry Sarah Thompson, the heiress of one of the largest real estate firms in the country. The bakery's facade preserved the charm of decades past, with its blue and white tiles telling silent stories of generations that had built cherished memories there. The hand-carved wooden sign, worn by time yet still elegant, swayed gently in the January breeze that carried with it the unmistakable aroma of cinnamon, crystal sugar, and freshly baked sweet bread. David adjusted the knot of his Hermes tie and took a deep breath. Even as one of the most influential businessmen in the country, choosing the cake for his own wedding left him inexplicably nervous. Perhaps because deep down he knew that this union represented more of a strategic merger than an act of true love. The vintage doorbell chimed melodiously as he pushed open the glass door, adorned with golden designs. The interior of the bakery was a warm embrace from another time. Carrara marble counters, with golden veins, shelves of fine wood displaying artisanal sweets arranged like small works of art, and the hydraulic tile floor with geometric patterns that his Italian leather shoes touched with involuntary reverence. The aroma was hypnotizing, an olfactory symphony that mixed gourmet chocolate truffles still warm, whoopie pies filled with artisanal caramel, and the unique scent of caramelized sugar that had deliciously stuck to the walls for decades. It was the kind of place that made even the most hardened executive remember childhood, when life was simple and worries were solved with a piece of chocolate cake. But when David lifted his eyes from the counter full of sugary temptations, the world stopped. Behind the counter, organizing chocolate truffles in colorful paper cups, was Marina Oliveira Santos. Her light brown hair, which he used to caress during lazy Sunday mornings, was now tied back in a practical ponytail, with a few rebellious strands framing her face with a natural sweetness that no makeup could replicate. She wore a white apron over a simple navy blue blouse, but there was a natural elegance about her that David had forgotten was so devastating. Marina looked up, and their eyes met across the 3 meters that separated them and the 3 years of absolute silence. For an infinite moment, the noise of the city outside faded away, the ticking of the antique wall clock became deafening, and the air between them seemed charged with electricity. "David!" Her voice came out as an incredulous whisper, and one of the chocolate truffles slipped from her fingers, scattering colorful sprinkles across the marble counter. But what truly made David's heart stop for a few seconds was the child Marina was holding in her arms, a little girl of about 2 years, with light brown curly hair, like her mother's but with unmistakable green eyes, exactly the same ones David saw in the mirror every morning since he was 18, a genetic inheritance from his Italian grandmother that he could never forget. The girl wore a yellow dress with small hand-embroidered flowers and was sucking her pinky finger while watching David with an innocent curiosity that made him feel as if it were the first time he had breathed in his life. In her tiny hands, she held a nibbled chocolate truffle, and she had chocolate on her fingers, and a shy smile on her lips that formed a dimple on her right cheek, exactly like the one David hid when he truly smiled. "Mommy, who is he?" The child's voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade, and David felt his legs wobble imperceptibly. Marina instinctively pulled her daughter closer to her chest, as if she wanted to protect her from something she couldn't even name. Her hazel eyes, which once sparkled with happiness when looking at him, were now filled with a complex mix of surprise, fear, and a vulnerability she clearly didn't want to show. He's a customer, my love," Marina murmured to the child, but her eyes couldn't stray from David's face. "A customer who came to order a cake." David opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. His mind, trained to make million-dollar decisions in seconds, was completely blank. He, who led meetings with ministers and negotiated international contracts with the calmness of someone ordering a coffee, now felt like an awkward teenager in front of his first love. The bakery suddenly seemed smaller, the air denser, and the sweet aroma that had once been comforting now mingled with the palpable tension that filled every inch of the space. David could hear his own breathing, the distant noise of traffic on Fifth Avenue, and the almost imperceptible sound of Marina's heart racing, or perhaps it was his own. "Marina." He finally managed to pronounce the name he hadn't said in 3 years, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "I need to order a cake. For my wedding." The words came out like an involuntary stab, and David saw the pain flash across Marina's face before she could disguise it with a forced professional smile. "Of course," she replied, adjusting her daughter on her hip and grabbing an order notebook with slightly trembling hands. "For how many people? And when would the event be?" The formality in her voice stung more than David had imagined possible. Continue 1 p.m. Chapter 2, The Legacy of 4 Generations. February arrived with that typical stifling heat of summer in São Paulo that made the air dance in invisible waves over the asphalt of Greenwich Village. Inside Sweet Memories Bakery, Marina Smith wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her gloved hand while kneading the sweet bread dough that would be transformed into the traditional summer panettone, a creation of hers that had become the bakery's trademark. The bakery breathed history in every corner. The cream-colored walls held yellowed photographs of 4 generations of the Smith family. Her Italian great-grandmother Giovanna, who arrived in America in 1924 with only a recipe for amaretti in her heart and the dream of rebuilding her life. Her grandmother Conception, who expanded the business during World War II, creating sweets with alternative ingredients when sugar was a luxury. Her mother Helena, who modernized the recipes without losing the artisanal essence, introducing professional equipment when the neighborhood was still considered outlying. And now Marina, the 4th generation, fighting to keep alive a tradition that represented much more than simple commerce. "Mom, look!" The crystal-clear voice of Sophia echoed through the space as the little girl pointed to a butterfly that had landed on the front window. At 2.5 years old, Sophia already displayed the same voracious curiosity that had always characterized Marina, but there was a depth in her green eyes that sometimes frightened her mother, as if she could see things that adults preferred to ignore. Marina smiled, wiping her hands on the apron embroidered with flowers that had been a gift from her mother last Christmas. The bakery was exceptionally quiet that Tuesday afternoon, with only the sound of the dough rising in the oven and the hypnotic ticking of the wall clock that had been keeping time for over 70 years. The financial situation was worse than Marina allowed anyone to know. Ever since she had taken over the business completely after her mother's stroke 2 years ago, the red numbers in the accounting notebook seemed to multiply like a biblical plague. The rent had increased by 40% in the last year when the building owner discovered that Greenwich Village was rapidly appreciating due to the gentrification of the neighborhood. Investors don't understand the cultural value of traditional establishments, Marina murmured to herself, repeating the words she had heard from a real estate agent the previous week. The man, in an expensive suit with a predatory smile, had suggested she modernize the concept or consider selling the space to an international coffee chain that would pay 3 times the rent. The legacy she received was not just centuries-old recipes handwritten in notebooks covered with floral fabric. It was the responsibility of preserving the emotional memory of hundreds of families who grew up tasting the sweets from Sweet Memories Bakery. Mrs. Johnson, 84, came every Friday to buy the same condensed milk pudding she had eaten since childhood. Mr. Smith, a retired construction worker, stopped by every afternoon for coffee and sugar bread while reading the newspaper aloud for anyone who wanted to listen. The Rodriguez family had ordered the chocolate cake with strawberry filling for every birthday for 3 generations. Marina was not just selling sweets. She was keeping alive the soul of a neighborhood that bravely resisted real estate speculation. "Mom, what is Saudade?" Sophia asked out of the blue, playing with a modeling dough figure that Marina had shaped to entertain her. The question hit Marina like a punch to the stomach. How could she explain to a 2-year-old that Saudade was waking up every morning thinking about the father she had never known? How could she tell her that Saudade was looking into those green eyes every day and seeing the reflection of a love that had been too real to last? "Saudade is when we miss someone special, my love," Marina replied, crouching down to be at her daughter's level. "Like when you miss Grandma Helena when she doesn't come to visit us." Sophia nodded gravely, as if she perfectly understood the existential weight of the answer. Then she went back to playing with the dough, shaping abstract forms that only made sense in her childlike imagination. The doorbell tinkled, announcing the arrival of a customer. Marina quickly stood up, smoothing her apron and forcing the commercial smile she had perfected over the years. But when she saw who was entering, the smile became genuine. "Mrs. Carmen, how are you?" Marina warmly greeted the elderly woman with white hair who entered leaning on an ornate cane. "Oh, my dear, every day is a victory at 78, Mrs. Carmen replied with that typical New York humor. "I came to pick up my order of coconut truffles for my granddaughter's baby shower, and I also wanted to talk to you about something." Marina took the box of carefully wrapped sweets and noticed the serious expression on the face of the bakery's oldest customer. Mrs. Carmen had been a regular since before Marina was born. She was practically part of the family. "What happened, Mrs. Carmen?" Marina asked, feeling a tightness in her chest. "My dear, I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I overheard a conversation at Mr. Thompson's bakery." The woman lowered her voice, looking around as if she feared being overheard by invisible spies. "It seems that the owner of your building is negotiating a sale with one of those big shopping companies. They say they want to tear everything down here on the street to make a shopping complex." Marina's world silently crumbled around her. She had suspected that something like this could happen. The pressure on traditional merchants in the neighborhood had been increasing month by month, but hearing the confirmation of the rumors made her legs wobble imperceptibly. "Are you sure?" Marina asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Unfortunately, yes, my dear." My Mrs. Johnson took Marina's hand with maternal affection. "But you are strong, just like your mother and grandmother were. You will find a way. You'll see." When the lady left, Marina sat in the chair behind the counter and for the first time in 2 years allowed herself to cry. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks while Sophia played happily on the floor, unaware of the storm approaching their lives. The bakery that represented 4 generations of love, hard work, and resilience was about to become just another victim of relentless progress. And Marina, alone with a small daughter and doubts growing like weeds, didn't know if she had the strength to fight against corporate giants who saw family tradition merely as an obstacle to profit. March arrived with its unpredictable rains that transformed New York City into a labyrinth of traffic and unfulfilled promises. David Johnson had cancelled 3 important meetings that Thursday afternoon, inventing corporate excuses that his subordinates accepted without question. After all, who would dare doubt the priorities of a CEO? The truth was that he couldn't stop thinking about the bakery. In the last 5 weeks, he had come up with increasingly elaborate excuses to show up at Sweet Memories Bakery. He ordered cakes for supposed executive meetings that never happened, invented fictitious corporate events that needed fine sweets, and even created a story about a Japanese client who only did business in places that served authentic chocolate truffles. Marina received him with professional politeness that hurt more than any insult. She had become a master at maintaining superficial conversations about filling, flavors and decoration details, carefully avoiding any topic that could slip into personal territories. But David noticed how her hands trembled imperceptibly when he approached the counter, how she instinctively held Sophia closer to her body when he tried to interact with the girl. That afternoon, the rain beat insistently on the striped awning of the bakery, creating a melancholic soundtrack that echoed the mood of both. Sophia slept in her portable crib in the back of the shop, and Marina took advantage of the slow movement to update the accounts book, a task that lately felt more like a torture session. "The cake turned out beautiful," David commented, observing the 3-tier creation decorated with sugar roses that he had ordered for the wedding. The confectionery masterpiece was displayed in the refrigerated showcase, a painful irony considering that he was no longer sure if he wanted to get married. "Thank you." "Sarah approved all the specifications over the phone yesterday," Marina replied without looking up from the notebook, where red numbers seemed to multiply before her tired eyes. The mention of his fiancée made David feel a pang of guilt that he preferred to ignore. Sarah had shown increasing irritation with his excessive culinary commitments, as she called his visits to the bakery. For a woman who survived on organic salads and imported supplements, the idea of her future husband spending so much time in a place that sold sugar in all possible forms was almost offensive. "Marina, we need to talk," David said, his voice coming out more serious than he intended. She finally looked up, and for a moment he saw in her eyes the same vulnerability that had won him over 3 years ago when they met at a women's entrepreneurship fair where she presented a project to expand the bakery. "About what?" Marina asked, closing the accounts notebook with a resigned sigh. "About Sophia." The girl's name hung in the air like a ghost they had both been avoiding invoking. Marina visibly stiffened, her back straightening into a defensive posture that David knew well, the same one she adopted when she felt cornered. "What about Sophia?" Her voice had a cutting coldness that could freeze boiling water. David took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross an emotional minefield from which he might never return. "She has the same eyes as me, the same dimple in her face when she smiles, the same freckles on her nose that I had in childhood." "Many children have green eyes," Marina replied, but her voice was losing its firmness. "Marina, please, don't treat me like an idiot." David leaned over the counter, closing the physical distance between them. "Do the math. 3 years ago, our last night together before everything ended. Sophia is 2.5 years old." The silence that followed was deafening. The rain continued to beat on the awning, but it seemed to have lessened in intensity, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for Marina's response. "And what if it were true?" Marina asked, her voice now little more than a whisper. "What would you do? Leave your millionaire fiancé to play happy family with me and a child you don't even know?" "You were pregnant when we broke up," David stated, ignoring the provocation about Sarah. "Why didn't you tell me?" The tears that Marina had been holding back for weeks finally began to stream down her cheeks. "Because you were back with her a week later. Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to ruin your life, or that I was using a pregnancy to manipulate you. But you denied me the right to choose." "Choose what?" Marina exploded, abruptly standing up from the chair. "Choose between your perfect life as a successful businessman and a failed sweet seller with a child that would complicate all your strategic plans. That's not fair, Marina." "Fair? You want to talk about fairness?" She laughed, but it was a bitter laugh that had nothing to do with humor. "Fair was me finding out I was pregnant on the same day I saw your picture in the business newspapers hugging Sarah at a gala with the caption, 'The most powerful couple in the New York real estate market.'" David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He remembered vaguely about the party, a charity event where his presence was almost mandatory, and Sarah had insisted on publicly formalizing their reconciliation after the temporary breakup he had maintained to try to win Marina back. "I didn't know you were pregnant," he repeated, but the words sounded weak even to his own ears. "And I didn't know if you would be happy or feel cheated," Marina confessed, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "So I made the easiest decision for everyone, to take responsibility alone." "Easiest for whom?" "For me, who lost 2.5 years of my daughter's life. For Sophia, who is growing up without a father. Or for you, who is working yourself to the bone to support the two of you alone." The words, "my daughter," echoed through the bakery like thunder. It was the first time Eduardo had verbally acknowledged fatherhood, and the weight of responsibility hit both of them like a giant wave. At that moment, Sophia woke up to the noise of the argument and appeared sleepily staggering, holding a worn teddy bear. Her green eyes, still hazy with sleep, looked confusedly from Eduardo to Marina. "Is Mommy crying?" the girl asked with that brutal honesty typical of children. Marina quickly crouched down, picking Sophia up in her arms and forcing a smile through her tears. "It's nothing, my love. Mummy just got a little sad, but it's all better now." Eduardo watched the scene with a pain in his chest that he had never felt before. There was his daughter, being comforted by a woman he had loved deeply, who now looked at him as if he were a threat to the little universe they had built together. Can I hold her?" Eduardo asked, his voice coming out choked. Marina hesitated for a moment that felt eternal, looking into Eduardo's eyes as if trying to see his soul. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. When Sophia was in Eduardo's arms for the first time, he felt like the whole world had shifted. The girl studied him with curiosity, gently touching his expensive tie, as if it were the most fascinating object in the universe. "Are you the guy who brings sweets to Mommy?" Sophia asked, tilting her head to the side. "I am," Eduardo replied, his voice faltering. "And you are the most beautiful little girl I have ever seen in my life." Sophia smiled, revealing the dimple that was exactly like his, and Eduardo knew that his life had just restarted from scratch. Chapter 4. The Crystal Empire and its Cold Queen. Sarah Thompson's apartment in the most exclusive building in Upper East Side was a masterpiece of contemporary architecture that breathed financial success. Every inch of its 4,300 square feet, Eduardo gazed at the panoramic view of New York City through the floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, while his fiancée obsessively organized the wedding invitations on the black marble Italian dining table. 350 confirmed guests, Sarah announced with satisfaction, checking the printed list on gold-embossed stationery for the third time. The governor confirmed his attendance, as did the mayor and at least 15 congressmen. It will be the social event of the year. Eduardo barely heard the words. His mind was at the bakery, remembering the weight of Sophia in his arms. 3 days ago, The smell of cinnamon that clung to Marina's clothes, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about family recipes. It was as if there were two parallel worlds. This one, of polished surfaces and calculated relationships, and that other one, where real things happened among flour and sugar. "Eduardo, are you listening to me?" Sarah's voice cut through his daydreams like a sharp blade. He turned to look at her. At 35, Sarah was undeniably beautiful. Impeccably styled platinum blonde hair, a body sculpted by expensive personal trainers, designer clothes that cost more than many people's monthly salaries. But there was a calculating coldness about her that Eduardo had only recently begun to notice. Or perhaps he had always known, but chose to ignore it because it was convenient. "I was thinking about business," Eduardo lied, adjusting the cuff of his dress shirt. "Great, because we need to discuss our honeymoon. I was thinking Hawaii, in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton. I've tentatively booked 15 days. Sarah didn't look up from the list as she spoke, as if she were planning a military operation rather than a romantic trip. 15 days is too long away. And from the company, Eduardo murmured. But the real reason the idea bothered him was quite different. 15 days without being able to see Sophia, without knowing if Marina was managing to cope alone with the financial problems of the bakery. "Darling, you need to learn to delegate. You can't keep running after every operational detail for the rest of your life." Sarah finally looked up, but her gaze was evaluative, as if she were analyzing an employee's performance. "By the way, where have you been going all those afternoons? Your secretary mentioned that you've been cancelling meetings." Eduardo felt a tightness in his chest. "I've been personally checking some suppliers for the company's events." "Suppliers for what?" "Your company has outsourced everything related to catering for years." Sarah's ability to memorize every aspect of his business was simultaneously impressive and suffocating. She knew his company better than many of his own directors, had an opinion on every important contract, and influenced strategic decisions with a naturalness that he had previously considered partnership but was now beginning to see as control. "I'm diversifying, testing smaller, more artisanal options." Eduardo tried to sound casual, but he knew he was treading on dangerous ground. Sarah raised an impeccably shaped eyebrow. "Artisanal? Since when are you interested in artisanal? You're the man who only eats at Michelin-starred restaurants." "People are valuing authenticity more, products with a story," Eduardo improvised. "It's a market trend that can be profitable." Sarah studied him for a few seconds with that penetrating gaze she used to evaluate investment opportunities. "Well, as long as you don't..." As he interfered in the wedding plans, he thought, "I need you to confirm the menu with the chef at the Ritz-Carlton." He also needed to choose his cufflinks for the ceremony. David nodded mechanically, but his mind was elsewhere. How did he end up here? When had his relationship with Sarah turned into an endless sequence of lists, schedules, and strategic decisions? They made love with the same efficiency with which they conducted business meetings, dined discussing real estate and acquisitions, and even their most intimate conversations sounded like PowerPoint presentations. "David, you seem distant lately," Sarah commented, organizing the invitations in a binder. "Is everything okay? You're not having doubts about the wedding, are you?" The question was asked in a seemingly carefree tone, but David knew Sarah well enough to detect the calculated coldness behind her apparent concern. For her, the wedding represented much more than a romantic union. It was the consolidation of two business empires, the creation of a dynasty that would dominate the real estate market in New York for decades to come. "Of course not," David replied, but the words came out less convincing than he intended. Sarah approached him with measured steps on the marble floor, her Louboutin heels echoing in the minimalist space. When she got close enough to touch his face, David realized that even her affection seemed rehearsed. "I know I sometimes get too focused on the details," she said, her voice taking on a supposedly intimate tone. "But it's because I want everything to be perfect for us. This wedding will open doors we can't even imagine. Together, we will build something much greater than our individual companies." David looked into Sarah's blue eyes and realized something disturbing. She never talked about love, about building a family, about growing old together, laughing at inside jokes. Their conversations about the future always revolved around assets, political influence, and market consolidation. "And kids?" David asked impulsively. "When are we going to have kids?" Sarah blinked a few times, as if the question was completely unexpected. "Kids? Well, I thought we could wait about 3 years. First, we consolidate the merger of the companies, then we build the house in the Hamptons, and then we can consider hiring a good nanny and—" "Hiring a nanny?" David interrupted. "You don't think about staying home with the kids for a while?" "David, be realistic. I have a company to run, million-dollar contracts to negotiate. I can't just stop everything to change diapers." Sarah laughed, but it was a laugh that chilled his blood. "That's what qualified professionals are for. Our kids will have the best of everything. International schools, piano lessons, tennis, horseback riding. They don't need to be glued to us like leeches." The image of Sophia sleeping in Marina's lap among bags of flour invaded David's mind. The contrast was so stark, it hurt physically. A daughter growing up breathing in the scent of sugar and receiving sticky kisses, against future children who would be raised by employees in sterile environments. "You don't want to get pregnant," David concluded, and it wasn't a question. "It's not that I don't want to. It's just that I need to plan. Pregnancy is a 9-month investment that needs to be strategically positioned so it doesn't hurt my business." Sarah spoke as if discussing the purchase of a property. "Maybe we can hire a surrogate. It's more efficient." David felt nauseous. "A surrogate? Are you serious?" "Of course, it's practical. It doesn't interfere with my body or my schedule, and we can choose a woman with superior genetics. There are excellent clinics in Switzerland that—" "Sarah, stop!" David raised his hand, interrupting the flow of words that sounded increasingly surreal. "You're talking about having kids as if you're buying a car." "Don't be dramatic, David. I'm being practical. We are practical people. That's why we work so well together." But as she spoke, David realized that they didn't work well together. They functioned efficiently, like a well-oiled machine, like a successful business partnership. But there was no soul in that relationship, no true life. And for the first time since he proposed to Sarah, David wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 5. When Sugar Becomes Bitter. At 5:30 in the morning on a May Saturday, Marina was already at the bakery, her hands mechanically working the sweet bread dough while trying not to think about the red numbers dancing in her head like stubborn ghosts. The landlord's letter had arrived the day before. Another rent increase, this time 35%, with a 15-day deadline to accept or vacate the property. The aroma of yeast and cinnamon that always comforted her now felt heavy with melancholy. Through the fogged windows of the bakery, she watched Greenwich Village waking up. The first morning joggers passed by the sidewalk. Some loyal customers were already lining up at Mr. Thompson's bakery, and the neighboring merchants lifted their metal doors with the resignation of those who know another day of struggle was beginning. "Mommy, why did we wake up in the dark?" Sophia asked sleepily, still in her pajamas, hugging her worn teddy bear. Marina had to bring her to the bakery because she couldn't afford to pay for a nanny, and her mother, Helen, was hospitalized again. More tests, more doctors, more medical bills piling up like an unrelenting avalanche. "Because the bread needs to be warm when people arrive, my love," Marina explained, wiping the flour from her hands to fix her daughter's rebellious curls. "Do you Want to help Mommy make coconut truffles? Sophia nodded excitedly, and Marina set up a small workstation for her on a high chair where the girl could help by putting colourful sprinkles on the already prepared sweets. It was a distraction that worked for a few hours, until the child got bored and started asking when they were going home, when they were going to the park, when they were going to do things that normal 2-year-olds do. The doorbell jingled at 7 o'clock. Mrs. Johnson arrived punctually, announcing her presence as Marina's first customer of the morning. The 84-year-old lady had been coming every Saturday for over 15 years to buy her flan and chat about the good old days in the neighborhood. "Good morning, my dear," Mrs. Johnson greeted, with the warm smile that always managed to lighten Marina's troubles, at least momentarily. "And how is this little princess?" She addressed Sophie, who immediately smiled and waved her chocolate-covered hands. "I'm making sweets," Sophie proudly announced, showing her crooked coconut truffles made with love. "How wonderful! A real pastry chef, just like your mommy," Mrs. Johnson praised, then lowered her voice to speak with Marina. "My dear, you look terrible. Did you sleep well?" Marina forced a smile that fooled no one. "I'm fine, Mrs. Johnson. Just a little tired." "Tired, my foot. You're worried. You can tell the old lady here." The lady settled onto the small stool in front of the counter, the same Saturday ritual for years. "Is it about the gossip going around the neighborhood, about the new buildings?" Marina's heart sank. "Did you hear something?" "I heard that several shopkeepers are receiving million-dollar offers to sell their businesses. Mr. Thompson from the bakery told me they offered 3 times the value of his property." Mrs. Johnson lowered her voice even more. "And I also heard that those who don't accept will have their rent raised until they can no longer afford it." "It's true," Marina confessed, feeling tears burn her eyes. "I received a letter yesterday, another 35% increase in rent." "My God! How can it be 35%? That's robbery!" "It's legal, Mrs. Johnson. They can raise it as much as they want when the lease is up." Marina wiped her hands on her apron with more force than necessary. "And I don't have that money, not even close." Mrs. Johnson was silent for a few moments, watching Sophie play happily, unaware of the drama unfolding around her. "Is there any way to get a loan? Any relative who can help? My mother is hospitalized again. The doctors suspect another stroke." Marina's voice broke. "The medical bills have eaten up all our savings, and banks don't lend money to those already in the red. And Sophie's father?" The question hit Marina like a bullet. "There is no father in our story, Mrs. Johnson. It's just the 2 of us." But as she spoke, Marina mentally calculated David could solve all her financial problems. With the money he spent on a single tie, he could buy the entire building without feeling the impact on his budget. But accepting help from him would mean admitting defeat, confirming what she had always feared, that she couldn't take care of her own daughter alone. "Mommy, I need to go potty," Sophie interrupted, getting down from her chair and tugging at Marina's apron. "We'll go in a minute, my love." Marina headed to the tiny bathroom at the back of the bakery, carrying Sophie in her arms. When they returned, they found Mrs. Johnson thoughtfully watching the street's activity. "You know, my dear," the lady said slowly, "sometimes pride is a luxury we can't afford." Marina pretended not to understand the message, but she knew exactly what Mrs. Johnson was talking about. Every time David appeared at the bakery, and he had been showing up with suspicious frequency in recent weeks, his eyes sought Sophie with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. And every time he left, he would leave extravagant tips or buy absurd amounts of sweets that he obviously wouldn't consume alone. "Mrs. Johnson, do you know any lawyers who charge reasonably? To see if there's anything I can do about this increase," Marina asked, changing the subject. "I do, Dr. Henry, who has an office right here on the street. But, my dear, if it's legal, there won't be much to do." The lady paid for her flan and prepared to leave. "You need a miracle, not a lawyer." After Mrs. Johnson left, Marina sat on the floor next to Sophie and for the first time allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to accept help from David. He would pay the debts, solve the rent issue, ensure that Sophie had everything a child deserves. But at what cost? She knew David well enough to know that he wouldn't do anything halfway. If he took financial responsibility for Sophie, he would also want to take parental responsibility. He would want to have a say in school, in education, in where they should live. And Marina was terrified that he would eventually decide that a failing bakery was not an appropriate environment to raise a child. "Is Mommy sad?" Sophie asked, gently touching Marina's face. "No, my love, Mommy is just thinking." Marina kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the sweet smell of baby powder mixed with sugar, thinking about how to make everything work out. But deep down in her heart, Marina knew that it might be too late to make everything work out, and that perhaps for the first time in her life, she would have to choose between her pride and her daughter's future. The problem was that she still didn't know how to make that choice without destroying herself in the process. Chapter 6. The Disguised Savior. David's strategy was meticulously planned, like a military operation. Sitting in his conference room on the 35th floor of the commercial building on Wall Street, with a panoramic view of the city he was helping to shape financially, he had devised a plan he deemed brilliant in its simplicity. Help Marina without hurting her pride, providing legitimate business opportunities that would seem like coincidences of fate. Mr. Johnson, Sweet Memories Bakery, confirmed the order of 200 whoopie pies for Thursday's meeting. Carla, his personal secretary for 8 years, informed, reading a list of supplier confirmations. They also confirmed the gourmet truffles for the launch event of the Jardins Premium Project. David nodded, pretending to focus on the financial reports scattered across the table, the polished mahogany table. For the past 3 weeks, he had created a fictitious subsidiary specializing in corporate events, whose sole purpose was to generate constant orders for the bakery. Elegant corporate events had registration, a business address, and even outsourced employees who actually organized the events, all perfectly legal and professional. "And next week? Do we have the schedule?" David asked, flipping through papers he wasn't really reading. "Yes, sir. We have the executive breakfast on Monday, the presentation for Japanese investors on Tuesday, the launch cocktail for the partnership with the German construction company on Wednesday, and the celebratory dinner for the 10th anniversary of the branch in New Jersey on Friday." Each event was real. Each need for sweets was legitimate. David had simply centralized all the bakery demands from his various companies into a single supplier. It was brilliant because it was true. He really needed the sweets. He truly served them at real events, for real people who genuinely consumed them and praised the quality. Perfect. "And did you make sure all payments are made up front with a 15% bonus for prompt delivery?" David asked. "Yes, sir. As you instructed, we justified the bonus for the artisanal nature and superior quality of the products." David smiled discreetly. In 3 weeks, he had injected over $15,000 into the bakery through legitimate orders that paid above market prices for superior quality, which was true, as Marina's sweets were incomparable to anything he had ever tasted. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "David, it's me, Sarah." His fiancée's voice sounded impatient. "I need to talk to you about the wedding menu. The chef at the Ritz-Carlton is being impossible about some modifications I suggested." "Can I call you back?" "I'm in an important meeting," David lied, watching through the window as a helicopter landed on the neighboring building's helipad. "What meeting is this that you didn't tell me about? I thought we agreed to align on all important strategic decisions." The word strategic echoed unpleasantly in David's ears. When had his personal life become an endless sequence of strategic decisions? When had he stopped making decisions based on feelings and started treating relationships like business acquisitions? It's about diversifying suppliers, nothing that concerns you, David replied, his patience visibly waning. Of course it concerns me. We're partners in everything, remember? No secrets, no unilateral decisions. Sarah, they're suppliers of sweets for corporate events. It's not exactly a decision that will affect the national GDP. Sweets? Her voice rose an octave. You're spending corporate time evaluating suppliers of sweets? David, that's work for assistants. You're the CEO of a business conglomerate. And so what? Can't I personally get involved in aspects I consider important? Important? Sweets are important? Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant laugh. Darling, you're acting very strangely lately. First, you cancel meetings without plausible explanations. Then you become obsessed with irrelevant suppliers. You're not having some kind of midlife crisis, are you? David felt anger rising in his chest. Midlife crisis? Why, because I'm paying attention to details I used to delegate. Because you're losing focus on what really matters. Our wedding, the merger of the companies, the contracts that need to be closed before the end of the semester. Sarah's voice was getting sharper. You have a meeting with the minister on Monday, a presentation for Saudi investors on Tuesday, and you're worried about suppliers of chocolate truffles. And what if I am? What if I decide I want to be personally involved in every aspect of my business? Then I would say you need a psychologist, not a fiancé. The line went silent for a few seconds. David could hear his own breathing and the distant noise of traffic 20 floors below. Maybe you're right, David finally said. Right about what, the psychologist? About me needing a psychologist instead of a fiancé. This time it was Sarah who fell silent. David, you're being dramatic. All grooms get nervous before the wedding. It's normal. Is it normal to feel like your life is turning into a corporate schedule? Is it normal for your fiancé to talk more about business mergers than about building a family? We're going to build an empire, David. This is bigger than family. Not for me. What is happening to you? You've completely changed in the last few weeks. It's like you're living in another world. David looked out the window, imagining Marina at the bakery at that very moment, probably with flour on her hands, and Sophie playing among bags of sugar, creating real memories instead of conquering markets. Maybe I am living in another world, he admitted, a world where things have real flavor. Real flavor. David, you're talking like a teenage poet, and you're talking like a soulless executive. The silence that followed was deadly. David could practically feel Sarah's fury crossing the phone lines. We're going to talk in person tonight, she finally said, her voice cold as steel. And you're going to explain to me exactly what's going on. Because I will not accept being humiliated 3 weeks before my wedding because of some unresolved existential crisis. The call was abruptly ended, leaving David staring at the phone as if it were an alien object. For the first time in months, he felt free to breathe completely. Carla appeared at the door discreetly as always. Mr. Johnson, Sweet Memories Bakery is on the line. They want to confirm the details of the special order for tomorrow. Put them through, David said, and when he heard Marina's voice on the other end of the line, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Genuine joy. David, it's Marina. I wanted to personally thank you for all these orders. Honestly, I don't know what I would do without these corporate contracts. The gratitude in her voice hit him like a punch in the stomach. They're excellent sweets, Marina. My clients are Adaptações, Dona Conceição, Mrs. Anderson, Elegant Corporate Events, elegant corporate events, Marques Holdings, Johnson Holdings, Floricultura, Flower Shop, Confeitaria, Bakery, Chocolate Truffles quem, Moço dos Doces, Candy Guy, Filho da Puta, Son of a Gun, Palavrão, Bad Word, Mamãe, Mommy, Mãe, Mother, Dona, Mrs., Mãe, Mother, Pelo Amor de Deus, For Heaven's Sake, Mendiga Sofisticada, Sophisticated Beggar, Confeiteira, Baker, Empregada, Employee, Falsificou, Fabricated, Soluções Milionárias, Million Dollar Solutions, Desestabilizou, Upset, Conversar, Talk, Ajudar, Help, 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 Ajudar Help, Ajudar, Help, Ajudar Help, Ajudar, 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 Help, Ajudar. A help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar help, ajudar, help, ajudar help, ajudar, 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 help. Ajudar actions help to ajudar nos help. Ajudar is help to ajudar nos help to ajudar nos help is ajudar no help se ajudar nos help te ajudar os help se ajudar os help se ajudar os help te ajudar nos help you ajudar nos help you ajudar nos help you ajudar os help you ajudar os help you ajudar o help you ajudar os help you ajudar os help you ajudar nos help you ajudar nos help you ajudar no help you ajudar nos help you ajudar os help you ajudar os help you ajudar and help you ajudar nos 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 help ajudar so 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 help Ajdarsons and help, 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 Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons and help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarsons help, Ajdarson help, Ajdarson help, Ajdarn help, Ajdarson help. Ajdarson help, Ajdarson help, Ajdarson help, Ajdarfi help, Ajdarn help, Ajdarn help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar help, ajudar, help, ajudar help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar. A help, ajudar, 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 na help, ajudar, help, ajudar, na help, ajudar, help, ajudar, na 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 help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar help, ajudar, help, ajudar help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar. A help, ajudar, 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 help, ajuda, helpis 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 ajuda, de helpis ajuda, helpis ajuda, helpis ajuda, helpis ajuda, helpis ajuda, helpis ajuda, help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar und help, ajudar, help, ajudar und help, ajudar, 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 help, ajudar. She would never accept direct help, but admitting that would only confirm everything she was accusing him of. Because I knew you wouldn't accept, he finally confessed, his voice coming out defeated. Exactly. Marina slammed her hand on the counter again. You knew I wouldn't accept, so you decided to deceive me. You thought you knew better than I did what was good for me. I just wanted Sophie to have— No! Marina interrupted with a fury that made David step back. Don't mention my daughter. You forfeited the right to care about her when you disappeared from our lives for 3 years. I didn't know she existed. And now that you do, you think you can buy our happiness with dirty money from lies? The silence that followed was broken only by Sophie's sobs, who didn't understand why the adults were shouting, but felt the tension in the air like a frightened animal. I want you to leave, Marina finally said, her voice now cold as ice. And I don't want you to come back. I don't want your fake orders. I don't want your disguised charity, and I don't want you confusing my daughter. Marina, please. Get out! David stood frozen for a few seconds, looking at Sophie, who was hiding in her mother's neck, then at Marina, whose eyes were red with tears and fury. Slowly he left the flowers on the counter and headed for the door. This isn't over, Marina, he said before leaving. It is over, she replied, but her voice trembled for the first time. It ended before it even began. When the door closed behind him, Marina finally allowed herself to break down. She sat on the floor of the bakery, still holding Sophie, and cried all the tears she had been holding back for weeks. And for the first time since becoming a mother, she felt completely alone in the world. Continue. Chapter 8. The silence that says more than screams. August arrived with that dry chill that made New York seem like a ghost town in the early morning hours. David hadn't shown up at the bakery for 3 weeks, respecting Marina's request, but his absence weighed in the air like a physical presence. Orders from elegant corporate events had abruptly ceased, leaving a financial void that Marina was trying to fill with iron determination and shifts that stretched into the early hours of the morning. "Mummy, where's the handsome man?" Sophie asked for the 10th time that day, pressing her little nose against the glass of the display case as she watched people pass by on the sidewalk. At 2.5 years old, she still didn't understand concepts like forever or never again, so she kept waiting for David to show up with his kind smiles and little gifts that made her green eyes sparkle with joy. Marina felt her chest tighten. "He's not coming anymore, my love. Now it's just us two, remember?" "But why isn't he coming? Doesn't he like us?" Sophie's simple and devastatingly honest question hit Marina like a stab. How could she explain to a child that her father had appeared like a hurricane in their lives, offered hope and stability, and then disappeared again because her mother was too proud to accept help? He's very busy with his work," Marina lied, hating herself for it but unable to speak the truth. "Busier than you, Mummy." Marina couldn't answer. She turned back to the sweet rolled dough she was kneading with more force than necessary, trying to channel her frustration into something productive. The bakery was too quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Only 2 customers had come in since the morning, and both had bought just a coffee and a sweet roll. The phone rang, making Marina jump. For a stupid moment, her heart raced, thinking it might be David, but it was just Mrs. Helen, her mother, calling from the hospital. "Marina, my daughter, how are you?" Her mother's weak voice carried all the worry she was trying to hide. "I'm fine, Mom. You're the one who matters. How do you feel today?" "Better, thank God. The doctor said I can be discharged on Friday if I keep improving." Helen paused. "But I'm worried about you. The nurse told me you haven't been coming to visit me in the last few days." Marina closed her eyes, feeling guilty. "Mom, I've been working a lot. The bakery. Things are complicated." "Complicated how? Financially?" "Also." Marina didn't want to worry her mother with details, but Helen knew her daughter too well to be easily deceived. "Marina Smith, you tell your mother the truth right now. What's going on?" Helen's authoritative voice, even weakened by illness, still made Marina feel like a child caught in mischief. "The rent has gone up a lot, Mom, and I lost some important contracts." "What contracts?" Marina hesitated. How could she explain that she had lost contracts that never really existed? They were corporate events, but the company switched suppliers. "Did you try to negotiate? Offer a discount? Improve the service?" "Mom, it wasn't a matter of quality. It was politics." Helen fell silent for a few seconds, and Marina could hear the sounds of the hospital in the background, electronic monitors, muffled conversations, the echo of footsteps in the hallways. "My daughter, you need help, and I'm not just talking about money." "I'll figure it out, Mom." "How?" "Working 20 hours a day, raising Sophie among bags of flour. That's not a life for either of you." Marina felt tears burning her eyes. "What do you want me to do? Give up the bakery? Throw away 4 generations of family tradition?" "I want you to be realistic. Tradition doesn't pay the electric bill." "Mom!" "Marina, listen to me." Helen's voice grew more serious. "Your great-grandmother Giovanna came to America with nothing, just a recipe for almond cookies and a lot of courage. Your grandmother Constance kept the bakery running during the war when sugar was a luxury. I modernized the business when the neighborhood changed. We've all made sacrifices and adaptations to survive, and I'm doing the same thing. No, my daughter, you are being stubborn. There's a difference between making necessary sacrifices and killing yourself with pride. Marina wiped away a tear that escaped. It's not pride, Mom. It's dignity. Dignity for whom? Yours or Sophie's? Because a 2-year-old needs stability, not lessons on heroic endurance. The conversation was interrupted by Sophie's voice, who had grown tired of waiting for David and was now tugging at Marina's apron. Mom, I'm hungry. Marina looked at her daughter. Messy hair, simple but clean clothes. Green eyes carrying an innocence that Marina felt compelled to protect at all costs. I'll make your snack soon, sweetheart. Marina, who is that? Helen asked. Sophie. And she's back in the bakery again. Marina, for heaven's sake, a child cannot live in a work environment. I have no choice. I can't afford a nanny. Then accept help from those who can give it. What help? From whom? Helen took a deep breath. From Sophie's father. The silence that followed was deafening. Marina had never officially told her mother about David, but Helen was a mother. She had eyes, she had intuition, and 2 weeks ago she had seen the engagement photos in the newspapers. I don't know what you're talking about, Marina murmured. Marina, I'm not an idiot. Sophie has his eyes, his smile. And you look too devastated every time you see news about him on TV to just be indifferent. Helen paused. Does he know he's a father? He does. And he doesn't want to take responsibility. Marina closed her eyes, remembering how David looked at Sophie, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke to her. He does. But I won't let him. Why not? Because... Marina struggled to find words that made sense. Because he will want to change our whole life. He will want Sophie to have an expensive education, designer clothes, expensive toys. He will want us to live in an elegant house in a wealthy neighborhood. He will want to turn my daughter into a spoiled princess. And would that be so terrible? It would, because it wouldn't be real. It would be a bought life, not earned. Marina, you are punishing Sophie for your own fears. I'm not. I'm protecting her. From what? From having a father? From financial stability? From opportunities you never managed to give? Marina hung up the phone without answering, but her mother's words echoed in her head like church bells. She looked at Sophie, who was happily playing on the floor, unaware of the existential dilemmas surrounding her little life. Maybe Helen was right. Maybe Marina was being selfish, protecting her own wounded pride, instead of thinking about what would be best for Sophie. But how to distinguish between doing the right thing and yielding to the inevitable? And if accepting help from David meant losing forever the daughter she had raised alone with so much love and sacrifice. Continue Chapter 9, when the giants attack the French bakery. The little cake emerged on Fifth Avenue like a silent but devastating invasion. In just 2 weeks of September, its tempered glass and minimalist facade in shades of grey and gold transformed what was once a vintage clothing store into a showcase of European luxury that made the traditional Sweet Memories bakery seem outdated and provincial. Marina watched from the bakery window the constant movement on the sidewalk in front of the new competitor. Lines of young professionals in expensive suits, college students with designer bags, and tourists enchanted by the authentic French charm formed since 7 in the morning to taste croissants that cost 3 times more than her artisanal sweetbreads. Mom, why does that store have so many people? Sophie asked, climbing onto a chair to see through the window. At almost 3 years old, her curiosity about the world had become even more intense, especially regarding everything that involved movement and crowds. Because it's new, sweetheart, Marina replied, trying to disguise the bitterness in her voice. People like to try new things. But deep down, Marina knew it wasn't just novelty. The little cake offered something that her traditional bakery couldn't compete with: international sophistication, a climate-controlled environment with ambient French music, uniformed bilingual staff, Italian espresso machines, and most importantly, the sense of status that came from consuming imported products, even if they were produced in an industrial kitchen in Osasco. Sales at Sweet Memories Bakery had plummeted by 60% in 2 weeks. Loyal customers like Mrs. Johnson still appeared religiously, but many familiar faces had simply vanished, seduced by the colourful macarons and Belgian chocolate eclairs from the French competitor. "Marina, my daughter, you need to see this." Constance from the flower shop entered the bakery, carrying a golden flyer. "Look what they are handing out at their door." Marina took the promotional material and felt her stomach sink. Grand opening, 50% off all products during the first month. Authentic Parisian bakery in the heart of Greenwich Village. The professional photographs showed perfectly symmetrical pastries, arranged like jewels in illuminated displays. How can they sell at 50% off and still make a profit? Marina asked rhetorically, mentally calculating that her own artisanal production costs barely allowed for decent profit margins even at full prices. "Industrial scale production, my dear," Constance replied with sympathy. "It's the same scheme as fast food chains. They do everything in a central location, freeze it, and distribute it to stores that just heat it up and set up the displays." Marina crumpled the flyer in anger. "But it has no soul. It has no history. It doesn't have a price that people can afford," Constance gently interrupted. "My daughter, I understand your outrage, but the reality is that they have the capital to operate at a loss for months until they eliminate the competition." "Eliminate the competition? They want to deliberately put us out of business?" "It's a market strategy, Marina. It's called dumping. They practice prices below cost to force small competitors to close, then raise prices when there's no more competition." Marina felt nauseated. "Is that legal?" "Unfortunately, yes. Since it is not proven to be predatory, it is considered free competition." The doorbell jingled, announcing another customer, but it was just Mr. Smith, a retired man who came religiously every afternoon to have coffee and read the newspaper. The 67-year-old man looked around the almost empty establishment and shook his head sadly. "Marina, my daughter, it's sad to see this place like this. I've been coming to this bakery for 40 years, since your grandmother Constance was still alive." "40 years, Mr. Smith?" Sophie asked, impressed by the number that seemed unimaginably large to her. 40 years, little princess. I was young like your mom when I started coming here." Mr. Smith sat at his usual table, but today it seemed smaller, more fragile. "I met my late wife in this bakery. It was here that I proposed to her, eating chocolate cake that your great-grandmother made especially for the occasion." Marina served Mr. Smith's coffee, but her hands trembled slightly. Each story like this was a dagger to her heart. The bakery was not just a business. It was a living archive of family memories, of important moments in the lives of hundreds of people. "And now," Mr. Smith continued, discreetly pointing to the little cake across the window, "now they are going to demolish our memory to build an emotional shopping center. Everything plasticized, soulless, without a true history." "Mr. Smith, you're not going to abandon me, are you?" Marina asked, trying to joke but with real concern in her voice. "Never, my daughter, but I am just an old retiree. I can't sustain a business alone." He lowered his voice. "And I'm worried about you. I heard comments on the street." "What kind of comments?" that the owner of your building is negotiating a sale with a developer, and that the French bakery is part of a group interested in buying the entire block. Marina's world silently crumbled once again. Are you sure? My son-in-law works at the registry office. He said they saw several deeds being prepared. It seems they want to build a luxury shopping complex. Mr. Smith took a sip of coffee, savoring it as if it were the last time. Marina, you need to think seriously about the future, yours and Sophie's. When Mr. Smith left, Marina sat on the bakery floor and allowed herself to cry for the second time in a month. Sophie approached and began to stroke her mother's hair, imitating the gesture she always received when she was sad. Don't cry, Mama, I'll take care of you, the girl said with the seriousness of an adult. Sophie's innocence broke Marina's heart. A 2-year-old offering comfort for problems that even experienced adults couldn't solve. It was the cruelest inversion possible, the daughter trying to protect the mother instead of the other way around. Marina hugged Sophie tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of baby powder mixed with sugar, and for the first time since becoming a mother, admitted to herself that maybe she couldn't protect her daughter from all of life's storms. Some battles were too big for one person alone, and some defeats were inevitable, no matter how much courage you had in your heart. Chapter 10. The weight of 4 generations on the shoulders. The October rain beat persistently on the bakery roof when Marina finally found the courage to open the wooden chest that held the most important documents of the Santos family. It was the eve of Children's Day, and Sophie was sleeping peacefully in her portable crib, unaware of the storm approaching their lives like an inevitable hurricane. Mrs. Helen had been discharged from the hospital the previous week, but her recovery was slow and the doctors were clear. No strong emotions, no stress, nothing that could provoke another stroke. Marina alone carried the weight of decisions that would determine the fate not only of her daughter, but of a century of family tradition. My goodness, Marina murmured upon finding documents she hadn't seen in years. There were the original deeds of the bakery from 1924, when her great-grandmother Giovanna bought the place with savings gathered penny by penny, yellowed photographs of 4 generations of Santos women working in the same kitchen, handwritten notebooks with century-old recipes, written in archaic Italian, and at the bottom of the chest, like a bomb about to explode, the document she feared finding the most, the mortgage, signed 2 years ago by her mother Helen, when the doctor still didn't know if she would survive the first stroke. The amount was enough to pay off all medical debts and keep the bakery running for a year. But Marina never imagined the due date would be so close, November 15th, just 3 weeks away. $200,000, Marina read aloud, feeling her legs wobble. It was more money than she could ever gather in a lifetime selling truffles and whoopie pies. The rain intensified, and through the fogged windows, she could see the lights of the little cake shining brightly, even at 10 o'clock at night. The French competitor operated until midnight, attracting the nightlife crowd that used to frequent the traditional bars and restaurants in the neighborhood. Marina sat on the cold bakery floor, surrounded by documents that told the story of her family, and allowed herself to imagine how it would be to explain to Sophie that they would have to leave the only home the girl had ever known, how to tell her that the bakery where she learned to walk, where she played among bags of sugar, where every corner held memories of love and safety, would soon be just another soulless commercial building. The phone rang, cutting through the melancholic silence of the night. Marina hesitated. Who would call after 10 o'clock? When she finally answered, the voice on the other end completely surprised her. Marina, it's me, Mrs. Johnson. I know it's late, but I needed to talk to you urgently. Mrs. Johnson was the bakery's oldest customer, a 78-year-old lady who had known the Santos family since the times. Mrs. Johnson, are you okay? It's very late for... I'm fine, my dear, but you won't be when you find out what I discovered. The old woman's voice was tense. My grandson works at the City Hall in the business licensing department. He told me something that will break your heart. Marina felt her stomach drop. What is it? That French bakery was never French at all. It's a Brazilian company using a foreign name to deceive customers. And the worst part, they bought information about all the traditional establishments in the neighborhood. They know exactly who is struggling financially, who has debts, who is vulnerable. What do you mean? They studied every family business in Greenwich Village and strategically chose where to set up shop to cause maximum damage. And, Marina, Mrs. Johnson paused dramatically, your bakery was the main target. Marina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Main target how? They know about the mortgage, dear. They know it's due in 3 weeks. And they've already made an offer to the bank that holds your debt. What kind of offer? They want to buy your debt to force immediate foreclosure. That way, they take possession of the property without having to negotiate with you or the current owner. Marina let the phone slip from her trembling hands. It was worse than she had imagined. It wasn't just unfair competition. It was a deliberate financial war against her family, against her history, against everything that 4 generations of Johnson women had built with blood, sweat, and tears. When she managed to grab the phone back, Mrs. Johnson was still talking. You need a lawyer, you need money, you need professional help. You can't face this alone. Mrs. Johnson, Marina interrupted, her voice coming out strangely calm. Do you know anyone who lends $500,000 to a bankrupt baker without collateral? The silence on the other end of the line was the most honest answer Marina could receive. After hanging up, she sat on the floor for 2 hours, watching Sophie sleep peacefully, calculating all possible options in her mind. Selling her own apartment wouldn't even yield 1/3 of the necessary amount. Asking for a bank loan was impossible with her name already tarnished. Turning to loan sharks would be signing her own financial death sentence. There was only one option left, an option she had been avoiding for months, which represented everything she had fought against since becoming a mother, but which might be the only way to save Sophie's future. At 2 in the morning, Marina picked up the phone and dialed a number she knew by heart, even after 3 months without using it. The call rang several times before being answered by a groggy voice. "Hello?" "David," Marina said, her voice breaking on the first syllable. "It's me, Marina. I need to talk to you." On the other end of the line, David immediately woke up completely. "Marina, what happened? Is Sophie okay?" "Sophie is fine, but we are not." Marina took a deep breath, preparing to say the hardest words of her life. "David, I need your help, and this time I really need it." The silence that followed lasted only 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "I'm on my way," David said, and Marina could hear drawers opening, keys jingling, hurried footsteps. "Hang in there. I'm not going to leave you alone ever again." When she hung up, Marina leaned her head against the cold wall of the bakery and cried all the tears she had been holding back for 4 generations. Sometimes admitting defeat was the greatest act of courage possible, and sometimes accepting help was the only way to save those we love.